Every administration has an opportunity, of course, to set its own policies. We can't lock in the future. But just a week ago, at the NATO summit, we had more than 20 countries come together on the margins of the summit to announce that they had negotiated and signed 10-year bilateral security agreements with Ukraine. And that means that all of these countries, including the United States, have committed to help Ukraine for the next decade, build up its deterrent capacity, build up its defenses. Now, if we were to renege on that, I suppose that's possible. But happily, we have another 20-some-odd countries, and we're heading to more than 30 that will be doing the same thing. These are long-term commitments to Ukraine.
I want to ask about what it would take for the U.S. to change its policy on how far Ukraine can shoot weapons into Russia. And I'm drawing for that question, I reached out to colleagues in our Kyiv bureau, including Ukrainian colleagues. I was curious what they would want to ask you. They want to know, does Washington want Ukraine to win or not?
I think if you look at the last 2.5 years, it's hard to conclude that anyone has done more for Ukraine to assure its success than the United States of America. And that will continue for as long as we have anything to say about it. Now,
that is true, but they would point out they're being asked to fight with one hand tied behind their back.
Every step along the way, we've tried to make sure that we're adapting and adjusting to the realities on the ground, to what's actually happening, to make sure that Ukrainians have what they need when they need it. But often it's not as simple as it seems. Let me give you an example. At various points during these last 2.5 years, one weapon system or another has made its way into the headlines. Maybe it's F-16s, which, as you noted, are in the process of being delivered. Maybe it's an Abrams tank, some other system. And there seems to be this binary question, oh, we give it to them or we don't. But it's not as simple as that. It's not enough to give them a weapon system. They have to be able to use it. They have to be able to maintain it. It has to be part of a cohesive strategy. And so as we've done these things, and Lloyd Austin has done an extraordinary job bringing together more than 50 countries in support of Ukraine's defense, but also working through each of these decisions. And again, every step along the way as necessary, we've done more, we've adjusted, we've adapted, and I'm convinced we'll continue to do that.
So on this specific question of Ukraine's ability to use the weapons it is being given to actually attack the enemy that is attacking them, it sounds like that is a conversation that is ongoing?
There's always an ongoing conversation.
Yeah. Okay. Why not make crystal clear Ukraine has a place in NATO? Ukraine will get membership in NATO, put some kind of timeline on it, a year, 2 years, 5 years, I don't know. But just to make clear to Vladimir Putin, we're calling your bluff.
We have made that crystal clear. That's exactly what the last two NATO summit declarations say. Vilnius, Ukraine will become a member of NATO when conditions allow, when all the members agree. In this summit, we've talked about the irreversibility of Ukraine's path to NATO. And more than that, I think it's easy to look at the language in a summit declaration and maybe harder to understand what's actually happening in a practical way. We were really determined with this summit to build a bridge to Ukraine's NATO membership because, again, you have to do this in a deliberate, methodical way to make sure that any country coming in is prepared to assume the responsibilities of membership, contributes fully to the alliance, and meets the various requirements. So this last summit really put in place a bridge for Ukraine to go across. For the first time ever, we've stood up a dedicated NATO command whose purpose is basically to help Ukraine cross that bridge. We've never done that before. So I think the direction is clear. And if you're in Moscow...
The timeline is TBD, but after the war
ends? The timeline
ends?
is based on meeting the various requirements, but I'm convinced that what we put in place will help Ukraine do that quickly.
I want to ask about Americans detained in Russia, including Evan Gershkovich of the Wall Street Journal, who was sentenced this morning to 16 years in prison. Also, Vladimir Kara-Murza, who was awarded the Pulitzer Prize this year for his columns for the Washington Post. How do we bring them home?
I think you had Roger Carstens here a couple of days ago. Roger, his team, every single day are working to bring unjustly detained Americans home wherever they're held. And of course, when it comes to Evan, when it comes to Paul Whelan, in Russia, other Americans, we're working it quite literally every day, looking to see what we can do to get them home. We've had a rather extraordinary track record over the last 3.5 years of doing just that, bringing some 30 Americans home from different places around the world where they were being unjustly detained. All I can tell you is this. We're working it. We're working it as we speak, and we're not going to stop until we get Evan home, we get Paul Whelan home, until we get others home.
Understanding and appreciating that you would not want to get into any details in a public forum of negotiations that may be underway. Is Putin, and many other bad actors in the world, but let's stick with Putin, is he just waiting out Biden? Like, why would he cut a deal on Evan Gershkovich now when it's such a huge bargaining chip for him with the next administration?
Well, you're right. I'm not going to get into the details. Look, any effort to bring any American home is going to be part of a process of back and forth, of discussion, potentially of negotiation. And depending on what the other side is looking for, they'll reach their own conclusions about whether it meets whatever their needs are, and we can bring someone home. And I don't think that's dependent on an election in the United States or anywhere else.
Okay. You talked about how Russia, in your view, has already lost, that they're facing a bigger, stronger NATO than 3 years ago. Are U.S. sanctions, are Western sanctions on Russia working? And can you name for us a single example of where they have prompted Vladimir Putin to behave better?
I think we make a mistake if we look at the question of whether a sanction has succeeded solely on the question of has it immediately changed behavior. Because what we know is this. The sanctions that we've been able to impose, and not just us, dozens of countries around the world in an extraordinary coordinated effort that actually started before the Russian invasion of Ukraine. When we saw it coming, we got prepared. We brought countries together. We planned out what we were going to do. And in all the months since, we have added collectively to the pressure on Russia. But what does that mean in practice? It means that everything that so many countries around the world can do easily,